Good morning to you all, and you're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Thursday, May 21st. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min. And before we get started, here are the stories topping the hour. South Korea's exports plummet by 20% in the first 20 days of this month amid the continued shock from the coronavirus pandemic. Outbound shipments of automobiles and petroleum goods were hit the hardest. Relations between the world's two largest economies are still rocky as U.S. President Trump blames China for mass worldwide killing. Plus, China's delayed two-sessions Congress begins this Thursday in Beijing. Officials will discuss China's political, economic, and military plans for the year. Our starting point this morning, South Korea's outbound shipments tanked in the first 20 days this month over continued economic impact of COVID-19. The Korea Customs Service announced this morning that total exports from May 1st to May 20th amounted to some $20.3 billion, down by 20.3% on year. Petroleum goods fell sharply by more than 68%, while automobiles plunged by more than 58%. Exports on shipbuilding, on the other hand, climbed by around 31%, with semiconductors popping up around 13%. And by region, shipments to the U.S. were down nearly 20%, while exports to Japan and Europe were also down by double digits. Staying with numbers, the country's producer prices in April dropped 0.7% compared to the previous month, pulled down largely by a drop in industrial product prices amid slumping global oil prices. The Bank of Korea says last month's production price index stood at 102.08, down by 1.5% on year. The prices of coal and petroleum products plunged over 22% on month and more than 43% compared to the year before. Prices of industrial goods decreased 1.5% on month, while prices for DRAM chips rose over 7% from March. The row between the United States and China over accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic is getting more intense by the day. President Trump has again lashed out at China for being incapable to respond to the outbreak. And the Trump administration's most vocal anti-China critic, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, also unleashed a sharp rebuke of Chinese authorities. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
President Trump is still firing barbs at China, again blaming the country for what he called its incompetence in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump took to Twitter Wednesday, lashing out at Beijing for, quote, mass worldwide killing. He even referred to an unidentified, quote, wacko in China in an earlier tweet. President Trump specified it was the incompetence of China that led to the wave of death around the world. It was unclear what Chinese remarks prompted President Trump's tweet. But Guo Wei-min, spokesperson for the third session of the 13th National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, said Wednesday that efforts to smear China over COVID-19 by some politicians in countries like the U.S. will not succeed. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson also said on the same day that China is opposed to any political maneuvering under the pretext of COVID-19. President Trump was not the only U.S. official lashing out at Beijing. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also unleashed a blunt and blistering verbal assault against Beijing's leadership, describing it as a brutal and authoritarian regime. Pompeo, who is Trump administration's most vocal anti-China critic, also refuted remarks made this week by Chinese President Xi Jinping at the World Health Assembly, during which he claimed Beijing has been open and transparent about the outbreak. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump will soon decide whether to host the G7 summit in person despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Taking it to Twitter on Wednesday, President Trump says he's considering hosting the summit at Camp David rather than virtually, adding that holding the summit in person would be a great sign of normalization. And White House officials say organizing such a gathering would take time, so Trump could make his decision within a week on whether to press ahead or not. If it gets a green light, the meeting would take place at the end of June. Originally, the summit was scheduled for June 10th to the 12th. All 50 of U.S. states have now partially emerged from the COVID-19 lockdowns, despite just a handful of states showing significant improvements in infection rates. With Connecticut beginning to lift restrictions by allowing retail shops and restaurants to reopen on Wednesday, all 50 states have at least partially reopened. And despite the latest milestone, health officials say Americans remain at high risk of contracting COVID-19. According to Johns Hopkins University, more than 1.5 million Americans have contracted the virus and more than 93,000 have died. After an enforced delay of more than 2 months, this Thursday marks the start of China's biggest political event of the year. The so-called Two Sessions is used to lay out Beijing's political, economic, and military plans for 2020 in this era of COVID-19. Our Lee Seung-jae with more.
Lianghui, or simply the Two Sessions, refers to China's annual parliamentary meetings, where the two main political bodies of China, the National People's Congress and the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, reveal their plans for China's various policies going forward. After weeks of delays, the event kicks off Thursday with the focus on China's post-COVID-19 economy and its continued fight against the virus.
The CPPCC National Committee attaches great importance to the goal of coordinating epidemic control and economic and social development. They've been thoroughly assessing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy.
Officials in Beijing see the holding of the Two Sessions as a declaration of victory over the COVID-19 pandemic. As the rest of the world, including the U.S., remained locked in an intense battle with the virus, China has mostly regained stability. To the Chinese government, it's a sign of the country's strong economy.
In general, China's social and economic development has maintained its stability. This means that China has demonstrated many of its economic advantages, including its massive scale, its strong resilience, enormous potential and space for maneuvering in times of adversity.
Watchers say the biggest focus will be on China's economic growth target for this year. This is because it'll be an indicator of how quickly the Chinese economy will recover after its GDP slumped over 6% in the first quarter. Others expect a major stimulus package to be announced to relieve some of the economic impact of COVID-19. Despite optimism China has won its war against the virus, policymakers face a tough road ahead, especially with the ongoing trade war with the U.S. and growing international calls for answers on the origins of the deadly virus and China's early handling of the outbreak. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
With the COVID-19 outbreak hammering demand, major department stores in the United States, including ones that's over a century old, are falling like dominoes into bankruptcy. And South Korean fashion companies that do business with the U.S. are also feeling the heat. Our Kim Jae-hee with more.
Major department stores in the U.S. are declaring bankruptcy one after the other as the country grapples with the COVID-19 pandemic that's discouraging or even preventing shoppers from going out. J.Crew, a retailer that used to have around 13,000 employees, filed for bankruptcy protection on May 4th. Luxury retailer Neiman Marcus followed a matter of days later.
It's so sad to see this happening because it's such a legacy brand. It's such a wonderful lifestyle brand.
The latest to go under was JCPenney, a huge retailer that boasts 118 years of history, around 850 stores, and some 85,000 employees.
There's extreme need and demand for essentials and household products and groceries. On the other hand, consumer discretionary items such as apparel, department stores closures, those have all been a huge negative. So bankruptcies will happen.
The failure of major U.S. retailers has rippled across the Pacific to South Korea's fashion industry as well, with many original equipment manufacturers seeing demand dwindle.
With distribution companies in the U.S. and Europe facing difficulties, South Korean companies working in the same value chain are also suffering.
South Korea's textile fashion exports fell more than 35% on year in April to some $760 million US. In light of the grim figures, the South Korean government has pledged measures to support the industry.
We need to reorganize our business structure to one that can ensure stable profits and enhance the competitiveness of the textile and fashion industry.
The government is also looking for ways to help those working in the industry. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Shifting focus, the Russian ambassador to Pyongyang says there will not be another North Korea-U.S. summit until after the U.S. presidential election. Speaking to the Moscow-based Interfax news agency, Alexander Matsugoda said the dialogue is deemed pointless for now and seems to have been postponed at least until after the U.S. presidential election in November. The envoy said he expects denuclearization talks between the two sides to eventually resume. And he added that Moscow was not happy with the holdup as it could potentially raise tensions in the region. The South Korean victims of Japanese wartime sexual violence are urging a local court to try a compensation lawsuit they've filed against Tokyo. The victims' attorney said Wednesday during the fourth pleading session at the Seoul Central District Court that Japan's argument of sovereign immunity should not be upheld. The Japanese government does not recognize lawsuits filed against it in South Korea under the principle of sovereign immunity, which states a country cannot be forced to take legal responsibility for judgments reached in another country's court. The attorney also explained that suit is the victim's last resort for justice. South Korea's 20th National Assembly held its final plenary session on Wednesday, and lawmakers approved 133 non-contentious bills before the day was out. And they include ones to simplify the online identify verification process and push for the reinvestigation of unresolved cases of state violence. Our political correspondent Kim Mo-gyan reports.
Rival party lawmakers have given the green light to more than 100 bills Wednesday in the current Assembly's final plenary session. One of the most anticipated was legislation to allow the use of privately managed identity verification systems online. For the past 21 years, online transactions have used a system of public certificates, which have been cited as a major hurdle to the development of the ICT industry and among senior citizens and foreigners for access to banking and other services. The revised Digital Signature Act will enable authorities to give legal status to security tools developed by private companies and give them the same function as the current public certificate system once they're proven to be safe and convenient. Other bills passed include one to launch a committee to reinvestigate unresolved issues related to past violence committed by the state, and another to make it mandatory for portal sites to delete illegal sex-related materials and block access to those materials. And to stop COVID-19, they also passed a bill to more closely monitor the movements of short-term visitors to Korea. Now, at its end, the 20th National Assembly leaves thousands of bills still pending, having passed less than 37% of the bills it introduced. The 20th Assembly will officially wrap up next Friday, and South Korea welcomes its 21st National Assembly on May 30th. The lawmakers' first task is to elect its parliamentary speaker. And as a sole candidate, ruling Democratic Party lawmaker Park Byung-seok looks set to take the helm. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
Good morning. It should be a fine day with blue skies and a lot of sunshine. In fact, those of us in the west, as well as Daegu, Busan, and Ulsan, will have very high UV levels during the day, so don't forget your sun protective items. And we'll also have good air quality nationwide. Temperature-wise, highs will be 1 to 3 degrees higher today in most parts of the country. But like yesterday, the East Coast will be breezy again due to easterly winds. So Busan and Gangneung will get up to 19 and 18 degrees Celsius respectively. And as for other regions, Gwangju should get up to 25 degrees, Daejeon topping out at 24, Chuncheon, Seoul at 22 degrees this afternoon. Now let's enjoy the comfortable temperatures while they're here for next few days, because starting next week we'll notice much higher readings, and this summer is forecast to be a hot one. Shorter term, wet weather is in store for Friday evening and Sunday. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for views around the world.
And that does it for this edition of Arirang News. As always, thank you for watching.